What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. It's time to talk about the Toronto Raptors because there have been a list of names that have come out that the Raptors will interview for their next head coaching duty. And we'll talk about each one, breaking down in detail of why I think they'd be great for the Raptors, and ultimately give you my three finalists at the end of this video, and ultimately a dark horse of who I think the Raptors could potentially hire. So if you're ready to watch this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you wish to hit the subscribe button as well, that would be very much appreciated. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you guys know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel. I'm getting out two shout outs for today's video. One goes out to Todd Stevens. Todd, thank you so much for supporting this channel. And the next one goes out to Corey Quartz, who said he's been a #1 fan for quite a while. So Corey, thank you so much once again for supporting this channel. Your contributions are very much appreciated. Now let's go through some of the list of names, and I'm well aware that this came out a few days ago, but I did really want to do some research as well. I didn't just want to give you my opinion because I think someone who's, assistant head coach for a specific team could be great or he could be bad. I went through some of the details. I looked at articles. I also watched some video as well, essentially doing scouting reports on some of these assistant head coaches. So let's talk about some of the names that were listed. So an article came out a few days ago highlighting how the Raptors will be doing a broad search amongst NBA assistants, ex-NBA head coaches, NCAA and WNBA coaches. And they also went on to state that the specific names that have been associated with the Raptors have been Golden State's Kenny Atkinson, Milwaukee's Charles Lee, Phoenix's Kevin Young, San Antonio's Mitch Robinson, Sacramento's Jordy Fernandez, and Memphis's Darko Rogerkovich, and one more, Miami's Chris Quinn. Now, for today's video, I'm obviously going to be speaking of Becky Hammon, whose name's not listed here. I'm also going to be looking at four guys here. I could not find anything on Kevin Young or Mitch Johnson as well, but I'm going to be taking a look at Charles Lee, Jordy Fernandez, Darko Rogerkovich, and also Chris Quinn as well. So let's start with the first one here. Now let's start with Becky Hammon, whose name was not listed there, but has stirred a lot of controversy amongst a lot of basketball fans in general, who believe that a woman cannot lead a men's basketball team for several reasons. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous because if you've been watching basketball for 10 plus years, you'll notice that she was right there with Coach Pop in the Spurs system that did fantastic. And then also in the G League as well, she won a championship in the Summer League. Excuse me, not G League, their Summer League, won a championship as well. And in her first season in the WNBA, she has also won a championship already, leading her team to success right away. Now, when you listen to her talk, it's just absolutely amazing. I did post a video on Twitter for those who follow me on Twitter. And if you don't, you can go in my bio and click on that. She posted a very thoughtful video. And this is an older video that was pulled up, of course, but she pretty much just talked about the emphasis of team success when being there for each other. And no, it's not just some moral story where you're just going to support each other for no reason. She emphasized so much on team support, on hustling, everything, on defense, and just watching the video. I'll let you guys watch the video. You can see her knowledge is clearly there. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on Becky Hammon because I think for those who know her, you know what an amazing resume she has, but also just her basketball knowledge as well. For today's video, I really wanted to focus on some of the other assistant head coaches because obviously a lot of YouTubers have already highlighted Becky Hammon. And for anyone, like I stated, who's watched basketball, you know how smart and intelligent she is. So let's move on to our next potential head coach for the Toronto Raptors. So one of the names listed was Sacramento assistant coach Jordy Fernandez. Now, I like him for several reasons. The more I look into him, the more I'm amazed by him. Now, I wanted to pull a few tweets and articles that I found by Raptor, and also just some information I found online as well. And this was one of the tweets that said, though, apparently Kings assistant head coach Jordy Fernandez co-wrote an 11-page paper on how the effectiveness of an offensive possession can be determined by the team's behavior and movement before the shot goes up. He also helped the Kings defense get him in for an interview ASAP. Now, the very interesting thing I found here was team's behavior, because the team's behavior for the Toronto Raptors has been highlighted by none other than their own Masai Ujiri, who has gone on to say in a few interviews now where they play selfishly and it just seems like they're not playing Raptors basketball. Another thing is movement before the shot goes up. You see the Raptors going way too ISO heavy where there's no ball movement. Everyone is just watching the ISO defender. So having a system, if you could have Jordy Fernandez come in and create a system where you can have people rotating everywhere, much like how you see the Sacramento Kings, that would be amazing. Now, obviously, it's not going to look like the Sacramento Kings because they do have some very talented offensive players, but also because they have some great three-point shooting. So I don't think bringing in Fernandez is necessarily going to solve all of those issues right away. Obviously, The Raptors need some three-point shooting as well. So it'll be very interesting. But I did want to highlight another thing about Jordy Fernandez as well before we move on to the next potential head coach. Now, this was by Raptors Raptor, and it said, having worked with names like LeBron and Nikola Jokic in the past, Fernandez's hallmark includes an emphasis on big men who can pass and three-point shooting. Now, again, the Raptors need to get some three-point shooting in order for him to really work his magic, but I find it interesting where it says big men who can pass. The Raptors do have someone in Jakob Poeltl who's a really good passer. Let's be honest. For Central, he also went on to state that Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes could both benefit from this directive, especially if they buy into the system Fernandez helped run in Sacramento. One interesting part about Fernandez's candidacy is the fact that he has been on the record taking some swipes at positionless basketball, instead choosing to have his players hone in on specialized skills. Will Masai Ujiri be willing to bend his philosophy to accommodate Fernandez? Now, this one is very interesting. I've been one of the few YouTubers that have been staying from the very beginning in terms of Raptors YouTubers that have been absolutely against small ball lineups. The reason being is it exerts too much energy. And this was a fine case. I saw the Clippers game versus the Suns. It was, I believe, game 2 or 3. And yes, I know the Clippers lost because they didn't have Kawhi or Paul George. But one thing I really noticed the Clippers running a small ball lineup at the end of the game was you can have all the great defensive positions you want, but it doesn't help you when you got someone getting those rebounds like DeAndre Ayton did in those last few minutes. So all of that energy exerted honestly seems like a waste when you have guys like Terrence Mann who's trying to box out someone like a DeAndre Ayton. There's a huge size difference. So I know a lot of people feel like this small ball lineup goes somewhere. I was personally against it the whole time, and I still am against it. And you're seeing now that the Raptors have a center, what a difference it makes to actually have a center. So again, I think Jordy Fernandez is going to be one of those coaches that comes in is absolutely going to change the way that the Raptors run their offense. Very interesting one. But let's move on to the next one here. Now, Chris Quinn of the Miami Heat assistant coach, Eric Spoelstra's right-hand man, is very interesting. I found this bio about him on Google search, and it went on to state that he marks the 9th season as an assistant coach for Miami for Chris Quinn. The former Heat point guard is the longest tenured assistant on head coach Eric Spoelstra, for the past 8 seasons. Quinn has played a major role in Miami's successful developmental program. He served as assistant coach, director of player development for 4 seasons from 2016 to 20, after spending his first 2 as assistant coach player development. He also worked with Miami's NBA G League team. He also goes on to state that in his first year with the club, served with the head coach of the Heat summer team as well before joining the Heat. Now, in terms of Chris Quinn, I'm going to be honest, guys. This is someone I really like for several reasons. Now, when you take a look at many teams around the NBA, which teams stand out to you in terms of guys that have been developed via undrafted, whether these are guys that haven't been in the NBA for a couple of seasons? The Miami Heat have always been there. And the big reason why I personally believe that is obviously highlighted by that article is Chris Quinn. There's been some chatter amongst a lot of Miami Heat fans that once Pat Riley retires, Eric Spoelstra will take his place, and Chris Quinn will become the head coach of the Miami Heat. So I think Chris Quinn, has been a key part of developing the Miami Heat culture and just some of the young guys as well. Like you look at the roster this season, outside of, Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, and Bam Adebayo, the roster is pretty much made up of undrafted guys or, guys that didn't do very well in the NBA and they brought back and now they're playing much better. So I think for a team like the Raptors that needs a lot of development on some of the young guys, Chris Quinn, having him in there would be fantastic. I think he's going to be a game changer for them. And also given the fact that Heat culture is so similar to the Raptors, not in the sense like they're similar, but in terms of how they develop their players, how they give their players a long time to develop, and just playing good defense, playing hard-nosed basketball. I think the culture is very similar there. So I think having someone like Chris Quinn would absolutely benefit the Raptors. Now let's move on to the next one here. Now the next guy I want to talk about is Charles Lee. He could be very underrated in terms of a head coach. I know people will be saying, well, he's Mike Budenholzer's assistant head coach, and we know Bud gets a bad reputation around the NBA, and he could be fired this offseason. But Charles Lee is interesting for several reasons. I'm going to highlight a few key points from an article I found about him, and he essentially goes on to state, they were asking him, you worked with Mike in 2 spots now, which included Atlanta Hawks and now, of course, the Milwaukee Bucks, and they asked him about his approach as a coach dealing with NBA players, and he pretty much went on to state, I won't read the entire article. You guys can pause the video and read it, but he pretty much went on to state how he's drawn a lot from Coach Bud. He's talked about different guys as well, But as an assistant, obviously in San Antonio, and then other assistants that he has had on staff, I've got to draw and sorry, excuse me, from Taylor Jenkins, who's crushing in Memphis, and Darvin Ham, and other guys like Kenny Atkinson as well. So obviously, this could be someone, if the Raptors do bring him in, Charles Lee. He's only 37 years old. He's also someone who just seems very open to the idea of trying new things, which is great because you need someone who's able to change, but also adapt to the NBA as it changes along. So I think this is great for someone like Charles Lee. It would be great for the Raptors as well. I wanted to highlight a few key points I found in the same article. I'll display this article here again. Now he went on to state, I'm a big power of positivity guy. Yeah, there are some adversities, there are some quote unquote failures or losses, but how are we going to respond to that? And how do we just develop this thicker skin to be able to deal with these adverse situations? Then controlling what can you when can you control kind of flows into my coaching philosophy. Daily improvement, how can we make sure that we're just making every day matter? Whether it's on the court, we're going to improve with our skill sets, whether it's in the weight room, getting stronger, whether it's our diet plan or off our nutrition, just to help the body recover. Have you just been obsessed again, like daily improvements of not getting bored with day-to-day improvements? Now, the second part is competitiveness. I think that if you can compete at a high level physically, but also the mental side of it as well. So again, I'm not going to read the entire part, but he really seems like someone like Steve Kerr. When you look at him in Golden State, we've all seen videos of how he's encouraging guys. He's very different from Nick Nurse, that he doesn't bench guys. He lets them play through their mistakes, but also just gives them a little bit of pep talk. Charles Lee definitely seems like one of those players, one of those, excuse me, assistant coaches that can connect with one of those players. Like I mentioned, he's only 37 years old. He seems very creative in the way he thinks, his positivity, his thinking methods are very different in terms of, going on day-to-day improvements, like he stated in this article. So I think he's one of those very innovative coaches that could be very interesting on the Toronto Raptors. So again, it could be one of those things. The only thing would be he doesn't have a lot of experience in the NBA. I mean, in terms of like potential head coaching jobs. And you could question, is he going to be the right fit with the Raptors? So again, we'll discuss all of this at the end of the video, but I do want to get to a few more guys here as well. Now, I really like this next one, Darko Rogerkovich. I know everyone struggles with their name, but he's the assistant coach in Memphis. And same thing, I want to go in a little bit of detail breakdown just to kind of give you an idea of what he's like, what he's done with the players as well. Now, Darko Rogerkovich is right next to the Memphis Grizzlies coach Taylor Jenkins in the huddle. Before the games, he's directing players through game warm-ups and showing off his vibrant energy by contesting shots and even shooting from time to time. He also went on to state that Jenkins said that he relies heavily on Darko so much. He's got a passion for the game. He's got so much energy. It's everything from how he handles player development, from film work, how he attacks opponent scoutings. And then in the same article, he talked about how he worked with guys like Desmond Bane. He also worked with Zaire Williams and also GJJ. So yes, Jaren Jackson Jr. as well. And some of the things that Zaire Williams had to say about him were really impressive. He went on to state his basketball knowledge is very good, especially on the offensive side. Williams said his schemes and the way he reads the game is pretty different. I haven't seen it before. Darko is also the head coach of the Serbian team as well. And he also went on to say that Darko just doesn't care who you are, what your role is on the team. Williams said he just wants you to be the best you possibly can be. And that's what I love about him the most. Now, obviously, seeing some things that some of the players have said kind of goes on to show that Darko is someone who's willing to work through the players' mistakes. Again, very, very different from Nick Nurse, because it seems like he wants the best out of every single guy. He doesn't care who you are. Like he said in the quote, he just wants his players to improve. And also this article went on to state when he worked with Jaren Jackson Jr., he's working on different things like three-point shooting, his inside game. So obviously he's someone who's very energetic, enthusiastic, and also is willing to work on some of the guys and make them better players. So the Raptors clearly need that. They have a lot of young guys who I believe could use a little bit more positivity, a little bit more energy as well. And also just in terms of guys that actually want to work with them and helping them improve as well. Not to take shots at Nick Nurse, but it just seemed like he just wouldn't give them the opportunity in terms of really helping them develop. It was more of just, you've got to play harder or you're going to get benched. And that's a different mentality than what we're seeing with a lot of these assistant head coaches. And it makes sense why the Raptors are looking at these guys. So again, Darko could be very interesting. Obviously being coaching in Serbia is a little bit different. Like I said, his style is different, but he could be very interesting. Now let's go on to the last one, Kenny Atkinson. I quickly want to touch upon him as well. Now I want to talk about Kenny Atkinson because a lot of people feel like he's developed that Brooklyn Nets team when he played. And look, I won't deny that he could definitely be very interesting in terms of setting the culture. But I do want to quickly highlight this fact. And again, this is no shot at Kenny Atkinson, but I want to talk about the roster he had when he led that Brooklyn Nets team to a 42-40 record and 6th seed in the Eastern Conference. Like taking a look at this roster here, there's not a lot of young players like Jared Allen. Yes, D'Angelo Russell are two guys that played really well, but this team wasn't necessarily young. Again, this is 2019, so about 4 seasons ago. They had guys like DeMar Carroll. They had Alan Crabb. They had Ed Davis. They had Spencer Dinwiddie. And they also had, yes, Ben Simmons' favorite player, Jared Dudley, on there as well. Kenneth Faried. Like you go through the list, Joe Harris. A lot of these guys weren't exactly young players. So I think it was a good mix. And even some of the younger players that are listed here, it wasn't necessarily like he developed them. So I think this team was a good mix of a lot of good veterans and a few young players as well. So I think there's often a notion amongst a lot of fans in general where certain guys just stick out. Kenny Atkinson, again, no disrespect to him. It just seems like he's kind of stuck out because of that one good season he had with the Brooklyn Nets. All of the other seasons, he actually struggled mightily with that roster as well. I know that roster was not good, but I don't know. Again, Kenny Atkinson, I'm not going to lie, isn't my favorite. I don't think he's going to be someone that could be here for a long overhaul. So that's just my opinion. But let's talk about my three finalists of who I think the Raptors will ultimately decide between. Now, I think the three finalists for the Raptors, one of the names you absolutely have to have on there is Becky Hammond. For the reasons I've mentioned, her basketball knowledge is just insanely off the chart. How she would manage a team, people are truly underestimating it and kind of just putting it on the fact that she's a woman. She won't be able to do this. Men won't listen to her because she's a woman. I think those are ridiculous takes, but I think her knowledge, her IQ is just insane. And on top of that, she's been under Coach Popovich. So having her as a finalist is a no-brainer. Chris Quinn is another person I think that will be on the finalist of people they decide of potential head coaching jobs. Now, Chris Quinn, absolutely fabulous, could be a very fabulous coach, I think, for the Toronto Raptors. Similar culture between the Heat and the Raptors as well. Play hard-nosed, play very hard defense. And obviously, I think he's done a fabulous job on working with some of the guys that have been undrafted on the Miami Heat's roster and developing them as well. Now, the third one is going to be Jordy Fernandez. This should not surprise anyone. Jordy Fernandez is someone. Let me give you a little background on him. Jordy Fernandez was first discovered by Coach Brown in 2008 when Coach Brown was on the Cleveland Cavaliers head coach. He saw him to he went to a camp, I believe. He saw Jordy Fernandez there. He brought Jordy back with him, and Jordy ran some drills with the Cleveland Cavaliers roster, and the management was so impressed they gave him a job right away. That's how talented Jordy Fernandez is. This is back in 2008, by the way. This is back in 2008. So he's worked with Coach Brown, obviously, and I think he's been a big part of the Sacramento's change overall. We've seen it. I think he's very crazy with how he runs his offense, the player movement, the ball movement, the behavior, some of the things that were highlighted. So I'm really big on Jordy Fernandez. And look, I would not be unhappy if the Raptors hired him because I'm very big on Jordy Fernandez. I think he could be a game changer for the Raptors. So these are my three finalists. Now, in terms of if I were to give you a dark horse, I think the dark horse here would be Charles Lee. Now, the reason I say that is because some of the things that the Raptors really need in terms of when they talk about head coaching duties. Now, Nick Nurse was a really strict head coach who did not give his players very much. He gave his players a lot of criticism, didn't give his players much positivity, didn't let them work through mistakes. And I think the big thing with hiring someone like a Charles Lee here is that it's a very high risk job, right? So you hire him and it's going to take several years for him to establish himself. He's going to learn. He's going to make some mistakes as well. So he's one of those guys that I think ultimately, I think he's a dark horse, but I don't think he'll be suited for Raptors. He's also, by the way, being interviewed by the Pistons as well, who I think will absolutely love him because he's someone that brings positivity. He's someone that's creative, that's willing to learn, and you want those qualities in a head coach. So I think someone like Charles Lee from Milwaukee's assistant coaches will do fabulous with the Detroit Pistons. I just don't think the time is there yet for him to coach a team like the Raptors. So again, that's just my opinion. I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. And the trivia question is, which player has the highest points per game in this year's NBA playoffs? Is it A, Devin Booker? Is it B, Kawhi Leonard? Is it C, Jimmy Butler? Or is it D, is it D, De'Aaron Fox? That was kind of hard to say. So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So that will be it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.